Coming up, we start our DTVC Extra look at the Bloodfist series with movies 1 and 2. Then coming up next week, I think we're going to have Ty from Comeuppance on. He and I are scheduled to record hopefully this weekend. So hopefully that'll happen. It'll be kind of our traditional 2-movie set that we do there. And then Mitch from Video Vacuum, he's scheduled to come on. I'm hoping to record with him next week sometime. We're going to look at one of the Seagal True Justice movie/TV episodes that were paired together, if you know how that works. So that's going to be really cool because we've had Mitch on quite a bit. Always wanted to talk Seagal with him. I think that's always been a kind of a fun conversation to have, and we were trying to figure out how to do it. And of course, with Scott Murphy, who we'd had on the podcast in the past, we're going to probably hopefully have on maybe sometime later this year. But he and I were going through all of the Seagal DTV films because he wanted to kind of see them all, and we would talk about them there. So I thought this would be a good way to get Mitch on and have him talk about Seagal. So that's what we're hoping to have next week. Hope that have that record next week. And so yes, we do have some guests coming up soon. So it's not going to just all be solo episodes from here on out. But of course, in 2 weeks' time, right, we'll be getting back into the Bloodfist series, where we will look at 3 and 4 for that one. In terms of the site, we are looking to kind of celebrate the life of Richard Roundtree, and so I'm going to do the film A Time to Die, PM Entertainment flick that he was in with Tracy Lords and Jeff Conaway. So that one's on YouTube. Always good to get more PM on the site anyway, so I thought that would be kind of a good way to do that. And it's a fun one that I've been wanting to review for a while. Watch the trailer because I feel like I've seen it before, but if I haven't, it's been a while, right? If I've seen it, it's been a long time, but it looks familiar. But I mean, you watch the trailer, and it's just classic PM, where it's like got this like sort of erotic thriller kind of feel to it, with car chases and explosions and people getting kicked out of windows and all of that stuff. So that should be a good one. I think it should be a good way to pay tribute to his career. Of course, right, when we do Bloodfist 3, we'll also be able to talk about Roundtree, some more in that. So, one of my favorites, one who I really loved. I mean, I think watching Shaft, watching the Shaft films on TNT, which, was the original Shaft in Africa, Shaft's Big Score, but also the TV movies. I think that kind of played a role with me in getting into B movies to the way that I did, because I just, love those kinds of movies. So, he's always been one that I've always gravitated to and wanting to see in things. So, yeah, so that'll probably what we'll be having this weekend. 2 weeks, we'll try to get Art Camacho into the 50 Club with Chinatown Connection, which is also still on YouTube. So hopefully we'll have that in there. And of course, we just this past weekend on Dolph's birthday weekend, we got Dolph into the 70 Club. He is the only member of the 70 Club. And probably means, too, that we'll kind of be done with Dolph for a little bit on the site, just because I don't really have much else to review. I mean, the Expendables 3 and how do you say Expendables 4? Expendables? I don't know. However, but the fourth Expendables movie, we could review those because we did do the first two, but I think it might just be better just to sort of take a little break from him, just now that we pretty much covered all of his DTV actioners. What we'd be going for now would be like SEAL Team, on Netflix, where he's doing voice work for a SEAL. Small Apartments, right, where he has a small role. Or what's another one? Sharknado 5, where he has an even smaller role. So that's kind of what we'd be doing with him. So I think, we take a break. I mean, obviously there are names like Fred Williamson that I've let go for a little bit, so I got to get some more Fred Williamson on the site. VFW is one that I've been meaning to do because it's on AMC Plus, and we subscribe to AMC Plus, but that app is not fantastic. Let me just say, it's not the best for streaming. So we'll see. And I know I hear a lot of people out there hearing me complain about streaming, going, "Come on, Matt, just get physical media, right?" And which I totally get, but it's a lot cheaper for me to do it, streaming if I can. So because we're already subscribed to AMC Plus. So yeah, but anyway, so that's the deal there. In terms of other work, books, novels, so I've hit a little bit of a snag with my novel. I'm hoping that this gets cleared up quickly. So I sent in for a proof copy, so I had the novel ready to go. The manuscript's done. It's all set. It's newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains. Put together a cover that I liked on Canva. So I thought, again, with the previous novels, there was no cover art. Well, now I made some cover art on Canva. So I wanted to see how the cover art looked, so I requested a proof copy. And for some reason, I don't know why this is, but all of the section titles and the chapter titles are just a series of dots, right? So it's almost like the font couldn't be rendered. Like if you get a PDF and the font's not proper, it's not something that your computer can render. But it's weird because with Amazon, they have a print previewer. So it's like you upload your manuscript, you upload your cover, and they kind of put everything together, process it. Then you can go to a previewer and see where the issues are. And the titles were rendering properly in the previewer, so I thought, okay, we're good to go here. But no, the other thing that's interesting about this font is this is the font that they suggested in the tutorials that they did way back when I wrote my first novel, Chad in Accounting, and I was trying to figure out how to format everything for KDP. It was I think it's Lucian Sands or something like that, but that's the title font. The title font that they suggested. So I'm using the one that they suggest. It's not even a fancy font or anything like that. And then my other 3 novels, Chad in Accounting, Girl in a Gun, and Holtman Arms, I designed covers for those as well. So I was going to re-release those with new covers. Same thing, got the proofs back, and all the titles are a bunch of dots. So hopefully they'll sort this out within the next couple days, and we'll get the novels available for everybody to buy soon. But of course, the thing is I'm going to have to request proofs again, right, before I check them, before I put them out, because I don't want to be selling them with that, because it's obnoxious. So it's one of those things, right? We talk about with things like Amazon, is it democratizes the space. Like I wouldn't be able to self-publish if it wasn't for Amazon KDP, where I can put my books up there for free. Amazon just takes a cut out of what I make on the books. That. In that sense, right, it allows me to be published, right, to have my stuff out there. Someone who doesn't have time to be an author full time, that in this environment where it's hard to get on with an agent and those kinds of things, or for me, I just don't have the time to write those query letters. That's really a big part of it. So I can be published, right? I can have my novels out there, and I still think the quality is there. For people who read them, seems they enjoy them. So it democratizes the space, right? But then I'm also beholden to what Amazon does, right? And so if Amazon has a quirk in their system, if their program has something off, because again, these are printed on demand. So if there's something off with them printing on demand, that maybe they upgraded their system and suddenly that font doesn't work anymore, and they didn't tell anybody, right? Or they didn't think to tell anybody because they didn't realize it. Then you're in trouble there. So that's the kind of the other edge of the sword when it comes to Amazon. But hopefully it's going to get worked out soon, and I'll be able to get those novels out. But watch this space, right? Everything will be updated here. And again, we've still got Bainbridge is still available for everybody to buy. Which again, I'm hoping if you buy a printed copy of it, that it's not going to have a bunch of random dots for the title. I mean, I published Bainbridge in September. Again, same font for the title, right? For the titles and section titles and chapter titles. Same exact font 2 months ago, right? So barely 2 months ago. I mean, literally September 7th, right? I'm recording this on November 7th, 2023. September 7th, 2023 is when I published Bainbridge, and it was fine, right? The fonts were fine, everything's working. So somewhere in 2 months, something has gotten screwed up in there. So again, just puts everything on a delay, right? And it kind of puts everything behind. But hopefully it'll all get sorted out soon, and we'll be in good shape. But and you may have also noticed with me using Canva, I've been playing around for some things, and one of the things is I created an actual kind of image for the podcast on like iTunes. So when you go there, you'll see a square that actually just says DTV Connoisseur Podcast hosted by Matt Poirier. So I think before it was just my logo, and it was kind of like my logo kind of stretched and like cropped in there. So now I've got an actual square. It's not a lot of work, not as nice as some, but it's something there. So you got a little bit of something different there. You'll notice when go on your iTunes or Spotify or something like that to take a look at the podcast. Well, yeah, so that is kind of everything for right now. So what we'll do is we'll have John Cross at Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures play in our theme song there, and then we'll start off by talking about Bloodfist 1, or the first Bloodfist movie. All right, we are back, and we are going to look at Bloodfist. I think when I was looking at what the next franchise would be to review for this DTVC Extra series, I was thinking of I was thinking of something that was a little bit more DTV, right? That had a little bit more DTV to it, and we had just done some work. I contributed to a piece on Bulletproof Action, where they were talking about the Bloodfist movies. I got to do a little write-up on Bloodfist II, which is one of my favorites in that series. So that kind of got me thinking, like, oh, maybe Bloodfist is one. And I mean, I don't know if Bloodfist is like kind of the ultimate DTV franchise, because it's really weird as a franchise, right? And we're going to get into this a little bit more, but really the first two movies are a part of an established franchise kind of thing, and then the other ones are just sort of just movies that just have Bloodfist in the title, right? They're just sort of tacked on, and they've got a number to show where in the series they are, but they don't really follow any. It's not like one movie follows the other, right? After we get past part two, and it's interesting, right? Because I was trying to think of some other movies to see sort of how that works, right? Where like you think of the kickboxer movies, right? Where 2, 3, and 4 kind of follow the first one, but it's like a different brother. And then 5, that brother gets killed. So it still kind of follows the storyline a little bit. So you've got that there. I mean, the blood sports, I don't think really follow much of a story either. I was trying to think if 2 and 3 kind of followed to each other, right? That if Daniel Bernhardt was playing the same character in 2 and 3, and then 4 was a completely different character. So there's those, but yeah, I mean, obviously from a direct-to-video franchise, and this one's an entirely direct-to-video franchise, to have 8 films plus that other Bloodfist one, which I'll probably be covering because it is on YouTube. It was kind of like a TV movie with Matt Mullins. To have 8 movies in the franchise is pretty prodigious. I was trying to think of other DTV franchises that have that kind of number of sequels, and it's hard to think. And again, it's hard to even think with Don the Dragon Wilson. Really, he's the only piece that ties these together, is that he as an actor are in the films and that they're Conquered New Horizon movies. So even that's kind of a unique thing, right? That the idea. I mean, you think of like the Fast and Furious movies, right? Where Vin Diesel is struggling to retcon stories to bring characters back, or have characters' stories be a part of things that happen, to tie everything together, right? He couldn't not have Tokyo Drift not be a part of the rest of the series, so he had to find a way to get it in there, or it's a completely different idea, right? When you're looking at these Bloodfist movies, where it's more just like, hey, let's just take Don the Dragon Wilson, give him some kind of down and out character, and have it be us against the world, and just see, have the story flow from there. And just call it another Bloodfist movie, right? That's kind of the idea. So, yeah, it's an interesting idea, and I thought this would be an interesting series to look at because of that, right? That I do like myself as the DTV connoisseur, so there's that piece of it, and this is an all-out direct-to-video series for the most part. These are direct-to-video movies. These were movies that, as kids, right, that we would grab from the video store, or later, we'd watch on cable. Especially those later Bloodfist movies. I remember those being on Spike TV, TNT, stuff like that, quite a bit. So it is that sense of it too. And it's kind of the series that makes Don the Dragon Wilson really Don the Dragon Wilson. I mean, he does a lot of other movies. He even does other franchises, right? He's got the Ring of Fire franchises, the Cybertrack films, Cybertracker, sorry, not the Cybertracker films. So it's not even like this is his only franchise, but this is the big one, right? This is just where it just features him in 8 movies, and he just gets after it. So there's that piece as well that I thought was a good thing, because I think Don the Dragon Wilson is someone who doesn't get enough shine on our podcast here. I know, I think Ty and Brett were on here, and we did the top 5 Don the Dragon Wilson films on my podcast, or we did it on theirs, right? That's one of the things I can never always remember, is which we kind of divide up those top 5 lists and see, sometimes it's on my show, sometimes it's on their show, and yeah, we just go for it. But yeah, so he's someone who doesn't get a lot of love on here. I was trying to think of the other episodes that we had done that featured him, and I know Will from Exploding Helicopter has been on 2 that featured him, right? We did Ring of Fire 3 with him. for the exploding helicopter factor. And then he wanted to do movies that featured kind of virtual reality stuff in the 90s. And so that's where Cyber Tracker came in with Don the Dragon Wilson. So I'm trying to think of other times we'd featured him, but there's not really a lot. Like, we just haven't covered him too much. I want to say that Jacob Gustafson was on, and we talked about one of his films as well. So that's another piece of it. But I think when we think of the 80s, the late 80s, early 90s being as great as it is, Don the Dragon Wilson, just a huge piece of that, right? And he kind of doesn't get he doesn't get the love that, with Dolph Lundgren, right? We give it to Dolph Lundgren all the time, how great he was. We talk about Seagal, we talk about Van Damme, and you think of like Cynthia Rothrock as a big name. On my site, Gary Daniels gets a little more run just because he's had more films. There was that period of time, and we'll talk about this maybe in a little bit, that period of time where Wilson wasn't doing anything, right? And so I think it was one of the movies, maybe there was a movie that he was supposed to do that he got frozen out of, and he was not happy about it in like the late 2000s. And so he ended up just sort of taking a break from things, comes back in 2012 and does this short film called The Liberator, where he's barely in it. It was kind of more of a Lou Ferrigno thing. Has a very small part in Scorpion King 4, and then he's kind of been back lately doing more stuff again, which has been good. But again, a lot of these are small parts that he's been in. And of course, New York Ninja, right, where he lends his voice to that, which was just absolutely fantastic. So that's the other piece of it, I think, right, with Wilson, is that, as we look at these Bloodfist movies, we're going to kind of look at his career, because these movies do span a good chunk of his career, right, if you think about it. You've got Bloodfist 8 comes out in 1996, and this one here that we're going to be starting when we talk about here, Bloodfist, comes out in 89. So a good 7 years, which is interesting, right? He gets I guess there's a point where he has a couple in the same year, I think. And at the same time, right, while he's making these Bloodfist movies, he's working with PM, and he's doing the Ring of Fire films, Cyber Tracker films. There's some of the other ones that we like, right? Like, Virtual Combat. Oh, Virtual Combat, I'm sorry, that was the one that I talked about with Will when he was on, when we were talking about virtual reality films. Cyber Tracker was one, I think it was Jacob Gustafson was on for that, when we talked about that film. So why don't we get in on some Bloodfist here? So Bloodfist comes out in 1989 against Conquer New Horizons, and it follows Don Wilson as Jake Ray. He's a kickboxer. He has his own dojo in L.A., and he's got a brother who goes out to kind of make his bones, or I don't know what the right term is, but he goes out there to sort of make his way in the Philippines. Looks like he's supposed to take a dive on a fight. Reneges on taking the dive, ends up beating the guy up. And then, as most people do when they take a dive on a fight, Bruce Willis in Pulp Fiction aside, most people just go out and get hammered, right? Like, that's usually what you do when you were supposed to take a dive on a fight. You don't take the dive. Obviously, there's some organized crime individuals who are going to be upset with you about that. But yeah, just go out and get hammered and wander around the streets drunk. That's the best bet. So, of course, as you can imagine, whoever wants the revenge on him does take that revenge, and he's dead. So now Wilson is out there looking for his killer. He meets Kwong, played by Joe Marie Avellana, who takes him under his wing and says, I was training your brother. I'll train you so you can fight in this famous tournament called Ta Cheng. If you fight in this tournament and you win, then, you can get some money. I'll take some of the money for training you. And, that all good. But, of course, we got to think that this Kwong guy has some ulterior motives. Other stars in the film, Billy Blanks plays a character called Black Rose. He's one of the fighters in Ta Cheng. He has a nice fight with Don the Dragon Wilson. Not a big part for him. Not something, not like some of the duets that he did with Roddy Piper, or some of the Jalal Merhi films that he did. So this is a kind of a very small part for Blanks here, but he's still good in it. I still, he's definitely shows off his martial arts prowess, which you like. Again, we talked about Joe Marie Avellana. So, of course, we know him from, I think it's Avellana. I don't think it's Avellana, but it could be. I know because he's Filipino in those, so there is a Spanish influence there, but I don't know if they pronounce that exactly the same way. But yeah, we know him as a Philippine movie mainstay, and another big Philippine movie mainstay, Vic Diaz, right, is in this. He plays a detective who kind of goes back and forth between speaking Tagalog and speaking English. Not a big part for him, small part, but you gotta love. Anytime you get Vic Diaz, if you can't get Mike Monty, I'll take some Vic Diaz for sure. The movie kind of feels like a cross between Bloodsport and Kickboxer in the way it plays out a bit. It has a little bit of those elements, and it's almost like as if, Corman. And I was trying to think if from a timing standpoint, if this would have had time for that, because if that would have made sense that they would have been ripping off those two movies, or if it just sort of worked out that way that those were the ones that they had. But that's the feel of the movie, right? It's also extremely, Philippine action direct-to-video feel to it, which to me I think is, it's been in a very late 80s, early 90s feel as well, which I think can't be understated. I think it's the kind of thing that makes a movie like this in a way that, I don't think you could, the way that Van Damme was rebooting the Kickboxers, I don't know that you could reboot this and get anywhere near the charm that you've got here. I mean, it's interesting to think about, right? It's an interesting thing to think about that if drawing a blank here, sorry, if Wilson wanted to go back and reboot these. So it looks like Kickboxer came out in '89. So it is possible that Roger Corman really got to work and ripped off both Kickboxer and Bloodsport in one movie, but it would have been tight, right, with Kickboxer coming out in '89 for him to be able to pull that off. So I don't know. But it does have a feel of both movies kind of put together there. But that's, when you're talking about a ripoff, right, I mean, I think Corman does it well here. It's fun. This movie, hits all the spots that you want from a late '80s, early '90s DTV actioner. And I think that's probably the most important thing for me is that, watching this again, which I hadn't seen it, I think, since I reviewed it for the site, which that would have probably been the late the late 2000s would have been the last time. So it's been, it's crazy to think that, right? That it's been 15 years or so since I'd last seen this movie. But watching it again, it was a lot of fun. Actually, I think it might have been more fun, right, than it was then, which was exciting. So that was kind of a good part of it here. I think the thing, kind of looking at it from a overall standpoint, is this is kind of the Don Wilson breakout film, right? Don the Dragon really becomes Don the Dragon in this movie. He'd done some movies before, and of course, this is a big point of contention as someone like myself who is reviewing movies and I'm tagging them, and it is right. We always know with my site, right? It's always I'm always counting the tags that actors have, and what club is the person in. And Wilson was close to being in the 40 club until we found out that some of the movies that IMDb had listed him in, he actually hadn't done, which was really, really interesting. I think one of them was I can't remember that. One of them was Siege of Firebase Gloria. That was one of them. Another one was a Philippine Vietnam film that I couldn't really find him in the movie, so it probably makes sense that he didn't do it. But I don't know. But the very first movie he does in '82, New York Chinatown, he's in that one. That one I've seen it. It was on YouTube. He was legit in that. He plays a baddie in that one. He's a really great baddie. He's like a cop who's kind of on the take for a competing gang. He's fantastic there. That was a really great role for him. And it's interesting because he doesn't play a lot of baddies, kind of since then. It's kind of interesting that, one of the things that, I don't want to say, one of the things that, the knocks that he gets, right, for these early films, these late 80s, early 90s ones of his, is that he wasn't a great actor, right, that he was still trying to get the hang of being an actor. It was almost like people joke about his wooden demeanor in these movies. It's interesting if you watch New York Chinatown, as a baddie, he was really good. He's menacing. He comes in. He's in the scenes. He looks like a bad guy. And granted, I mean, it's almost like he plays the part as a jerk that you're competing against in some kind of a sporting competition. So maybe that's what he drew on for that. But it is interesting that as you watch some of these other movies that he does, when he kind of really takes off, that that knock that he got for his acting, I think it was just maybe the parts, and it's possible too that the way those movies were shot, he didn't get a lot of takes, and he just sort of had to just go with it. Which, if Bloodfist really was meant to be a ripoff of both Kickboxer and Bloodsport, and Kickboxer comes out in '89, and this comes out in '89 as well, there is a good chance, right, that they may have rushed this pretty quickly. He didn't have a lot of takes with these scenes, so that there's that there too. But he definitely, you can see it right away here in '89 that he is leading man material from an action standpoint, right? He's a martial artist of a really high quality. He's someone that if you watch a movie that he's in, you want to follow him, you want to see him succeed, you want to see him beat people. There is almost a sense of like, I don't want to say all-American boy, but that, because I know that was the term that was used by Canon when they were looking for their lead in American Ninja, and that's where they came up with Dudikoff. But I would say, Wilson has it even more here, right? He's got that vibe even better. I think the fact that he's Asian as well, I think also, like in this film, in Bloodfist, they play with it a little bit, where like, he meets a guy who's like kind of a scam artist who's also fighting in this tournament, and he sees the sister, and immediately the sister starts talking to him in Tagalog, thinking that he's a local, when really, he's from California. Then after she hears him speak, she's like, oh, that accent, that sounds like you're from the Valley, which I don't know. I didn't know you could pick out California in an accent, but, either way. But I think that's the thing, is that like even if his acting is wooden, right, or if you have trouble with the acting in these early films, at least this movie is telling you that this guy's going to be a star, at least a star on the DTV sense, right? I mean, again, he's not one who ever breaks out into the big screen. It never quite works for him, and maybe it's because of that fact that he was considered wooden. I don't know. I don't know that the parts just weren't there, right? That they would have rather had a Seagal or a Van Damme. I mean, I will say it's interesting if you compare him with Seagal, that like Seagal does have a little bit better screen presence especially in those early movies, right? He has a better screen presence for sure. If you take like those movies that Seagal was doing from the same period as these early Bloodfist films, yeah, that Seagal was pretty badass and someone that you'd want to see in more stuff. And I guess, yeah, same thing is true about Van Damme. So as much as Wilson has it, he doesn't have it on that level as those two. And so probably these DTV films were the place for him. But you can see the sort of the breakout here, right? That this is the one where it's like, okay, let's see how many of these movies we can get. And then for us, right, as kids going to the video store looking for movies, if I'd already exhausted my Bloodsport and Kickboxer and Lionheart, or the other one, Above the Law, and the other Seagal films, Marked for Death, all those, right? The Bloodfist movies are where I would go, right? It would be the Wilson films, it would be the Cynthia Rothrock movies. Those would be the places I'd go next for what I was renting. So he definitely held that space really well. So I think that's an important piece to consider as well, that he, there was room in the market for someone like him, and he comes in and he really, really fills it with this movie. And it just sort of takes off to where now, studios like PM that conquered New Horizons, that are looking for movies to fill the video store shelves with, they've got their man here in Don the Dragon Wilson. And Bloodfist is the movie that you see it really, really happen for him, which I really thought was cool. So there's that piece. I want to get into the Corman piece about this a little bit more, just because, again, one of the things I always talk about is the length of the movie, right? And how it's such an important piece. And Ty and I are finding this with new movies, how important that the length is when we're we're watching a movie that's not really that great, but if it comes in at like 90 minutes, like Phoenix is one, a really great example of one that really, really had a lot of elements that struggled with. The budget wasn't there. The actress who's playing the lead, she talk about wooden, right? We're talking about Don the Dragon Wilson. She was really struggling with the material, and again, they were probably banging these things out in one or two takes, so she didn't have a lot of takes to get it right. She just sort of had to go for it, and. But it comes in under 90 minutes. It's easier to take, and it's kind of more fun to take. And I think that's something to be said about these Conquered New Horizon films, because when I always talk about the length of the movie, I always kind of go off of what Corman said about how it's not that it should be a 90-minute movie, make it an 88-minute movie, because that gets me in under 11 reels, right? And so, and I think 88 does have a white nationalist connotation or a Nazi connotation, so I don't want to think of 88 in that sense, and I probably should dispel that now that I always talk about a movie being 88 minutes long, not because I espousing any of those kind of beliefs or trying to celebrate anything like that or kind of doing it in a secret kind of way, but rather because I just how do I say, because this was something that Corman talked about, the 88 minutes thing, with both of these movies come in under that 88-minute mark. I think Bloodfist, the first Bloodfist movie, it's like 85 minutes, and the other one was like 84 or something like that. And it's just a really fantastic length for a movie. And I think filmmakers out there, I understand it's not as easy to do 1 page equals 1 minute. I know it doesn't always work. Somehow Corman was able to get his movies in under that. So he must have been like, no, you don't have any choice, right? I don't care that you've got a minute, it's 105 minutes, but you couldn't figure out how to get it in under that time, and so now you're stuck with it, and you're just going to have to release it at 105 minutes, right? That was never really something that he did. These movies were going to be under 88 minutes no matter what. He wasn't going to have it be more than 11 reels. And I think for filmmakers out there, you've got to maybe look at it that way, right? You've got to look at it as, this is it, right? I'm just doing it. It doesn't matter how I've got to cut the extra 80 minutes. I've got to cut those 80 minutes, right? It doesn't matter what the story's missing if I cut these 80 minutes. It's just got to go. Somehow I've got to figure out how to make it work, but it's got to go. And I think that's something that all filmmakers out there could look at and see, how do we get this thing under 90 minutes? Because it definitely helps for a movie. It helps a movie in terms of, for us watching it, for us, feeling it, getting the hang of it. I'm trying to think how best to say it. Like, it's the kind of thing where you're just like, yeah, when you're looking at, just looking at me watching these movies, I was watching them on the plane when I was, or watching them when I was visiting my family, and to be able to kind of sneak the movies in, right? Be able to kind of get them in, quickly here, right? It's just nice to be able to say, like, okay, I'm 20 minutes in and I've only got like an hour left, right? It just feels so much better. So, yeah. So, I think Corman has this part of it right when he makes these movies. Yes, the length was more of a cost-cutting measure that, spreading out over 90 minutes and having to get into that 12th reel costs them more money, right? And, of course, now we don't have reels, right? Now it's all digital. You're filming it on a digital camera. It's just taking up space on a SD card or a hard drive or something, so it's not really as big of a deal to have it in there. But from a mind or a brain standpoint in terms of watching a movie, I think if you can get us in, especially with a Bloodfist kind of movie, get us in quicker like that. Get us in and out, and it's definitely something that we can appreciate more. So I think that's an important thing. It's something that, again, modern filmmakers, I know what you're, I know it's not as easy, right, as I'm trying to put it out there as it is. And who knows, there are probably some Corman films out there that were, 105 minutes that he forced them to get into 85 minutes, that there's holes in that plot that make it really difficult for people to watch it. And, someone like me goes and reviews it and I was like, what the hell is that? That just came out of nowhere. So yes, I'm sure there are movies out there that Corman made them get shorter that don't come off as well as they would have liked them to. And they're probably a little bit frustrated with it. But the fact that he forces that's something that's a point of emphasis for him. For us as film watchers, I think it can't be understated how important that is. And I know, again, people think that I'm just completely obsessed with runtimes. It's really not that. It's just knowing when you've got a busy life and you've got a lot of things going on that you can get in and out in that quicker time period. But again, too, there's so many of these movies that, like a Bloodfist movie, like what could be enhanced by adding 20 minutes to that runtime, right? That there's nothing that needed to happen there. There's more about Jake's backstory. Is there another fight scene or two? Like, there really wasn't much more that could have added to this movie by adding anything in there. And I think for filmmakers out there, if you're listening to this, which I don't know how many filmmakers actually listen to this, I'm probably not many, but if you do listen to this, Just think of it that way. Just think like, okay, I really feel like this is part of the story, and I really think it's important to have it in there, but does my audience really need it, right? If I can cut this out and get us in and out in 85 minutes, is that better? Chances are it's probably better. That would be my thing there. So, yeah. All right, so maybe we'll wrap this one up here. I was trying to think if I had any other takes on this. I mean, again, I wish I had more to give you on Billy Blanks. This just the fact that he's in it is great because it lends a level of credence to the tournament scenes. You know, he's good there, but he just isn't in it enough for it to be a really, really big thing. And then finally, I wanted to kind of make one last note about this movie. It was remade in 1993 as Full Contact with Jerry Trimble. It had Marcus Aurelius as playing the Quan character. So Jerry Trimble, he's playing the Jake Ray character, only his character's name is Luke Powers. And then, Marcus Aurelius plays a character named Pep, who's kind of like the Quan character. I also had Michael Jai White as a character called Lowball, who was the one. So instead of it being a tournament in the Philippines, it's like underground fighting tournaments in Los Angeles. And so essentially, Marcus Aurelius is training Jerry Trimble to do this fights. It doesn't work at all. Like a lot of it just it's like weird that Marcus Aurelius is like the trainer. Because he's no Quan character. He's not really like a Joe Maria Aviana character. So there's that part there. He's also kind of like the same age as Trimble, so there isn't like it as a sensei thing. It just seems weird, but Aurelius just seems like he's just like lying around on couches and stuff, and just like just really not doing anything. So it's weird that he would be the one training anybody. It's a weird movie. It is Conquered New Horizons, so it is essentially Corman just repackaging the Bloodfist story and just putting it in LA, sort of like in a sort of underground tournament thing in LA kind of deal. But they just kind of, and it's interesting if you look at it does say Connections remake of Bloodfist. I was going to say it didn't say anything in the trivia about that, but it does say that. So it's interesting. I mean, there are really great martial artists in that movie as well as this one, so that part of it is good there. And I mean, I'm a huge Jerry Trimble fan, but I think for Trimble, if you want good Trimble, I think things like Live by the Fist are kind of more your speed. They're going to do better than Full Contact. But it is interesting, right, that they took the story from Bloodfist and remade it set in the 90s. Reset in LA in 1993, and just. And I guess you wouldn't have known, right? I mean, I kind of was like, oh, this feels like Bloodfist, and then I think it was maybe I'm trying to think if it was Kenner. Maybe Kenner from Movies in the Attic was like, they just completely ripped off Bloodfist, which is not really a ripoff, right? If it's your own movie, right? If you're Roger Corman and you're the one who owns the rights to everything, you can just have it be remade, right? And it is an interesting idea to just sort of repackage an idea and just redo it. It's kind of almost like Wave Productions, right, where they just sort of redoing women being strangled or women being thrown in pools and being drowned or that kind of thing. So but all right, why don't we take a break here and then we'll come back and we will talk about Bloodfist II. It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former Special Forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. All right, we are back and we are looking at Bloodfist II. Now, to give you an idea, I actually watched Bloodfist II on the airplane flying back from New England. I went and visited my family this past weekend, so I was flying out of Logan in Boston and then flew back on the way to Philadelphia. And just kind of fired this one up on my phone, watching it through Tubi. I was flying JetBlue, so JetBlue has free Wi-Fi, right? It's Wi-Fi included for passengers, which is a good thing because one of the problems with Tubi as a streaming service is there's no commercial-free option, right? And actually, I think Bloodfist and Bloodfist 2 are only showing in the States on free streamers that involve commercials. And if they have commercials, you can't download them to your device, right? Like, if I go onto Disney Plus, I can download all the Marvel movies because I subscribe to Disney Plus, and there's no commercials for them. Or Hulu, right? I have the commercial-free version of Hulu. I don't have the commercial-free version of Peacock, so I can't get, Forgotten, I guess is, I don't know, the movie we just reviewed recently, the Dolph movie we did recently. So, you have to have Wi-Fi to be able to watch them. You can't download them to your device. One of the problems, though, with Tubi not having that option, a paid option, which I think if they had a $5 pay option, a month or something like that, we'd definitely do it. But the reason why it's an issue then is that you're on the airplane Wi-Fi, which for the most part it was doing well this time. I think part of the reason why it was doing well was because the TV service that JetBlue has was frozen. I know for me, I was stuck watching the same loop of some crap thing that Gordon Ramsay was doing, selling, helping people buy houses or something, and he's meeting them in some places he's remotely on Zoom or something, and it's his big head is just sort of oh, look at how funny these people are. Oh, it's so great, Gordon Ramsay, you're talking to us about renovating this space, whatever it was, because I couldn't hear any of it, right? I'm just seeing it happening on the screen, but that thing was just playing on a loop over and over again. So luckily I had something to watch, because I think even reading, I would just had to keep looking up and seeing this ridiculousness. But anyway, so I think because of that, because they aren't always keen with JetBlue on making sure their Wi-Fi works. When I was flying up to Boston, the Wi-Fi didn't work. I went to go log in, and it said, "Oh, sorry, not working. You're out of luck." And so I was listening to a podcast that I downloaded to my phone anyway. So it's one of the issues with Tubi that you can't download the movies because of the commercials. But also the issue with the commercials is that they create a whole new loading process on the site. So if you're watching with the Wi-Fi and you're watching the movie with the Wi-Fi, right, it's sort of downloading bits of the movie as you go. And so it really has to be a firm disruption that knocks your film out. Whereas with the commercials, right, it has to load a news, whatever the commercial it is, it has to load that from somewhere else. Or I don't know exactly how it works. I mean, it still loads it from the site, but it has to. It's a kind of a separate thing. The movie is stopped, and it has to pull in this commercial as opposed to sort of continuously downloading bits of movie while I'm watching the other bits, right? So it's I'm watching the 3-minute mark, and it's downloading the 5-minute mark so that when I get to the 5-minute mark, it's ready for me. The commercials can't do that, right? The commercial's just a firm stop, bring in the commercial. So when it creates that whole new loading system, now it's oh, if there's an issue with the Wi-Fi, suddenly the whole thing goes down, and getting it back can be really difficult. So for as much as I love Tubi, and I am a huge Tubi fan, Tubi is one of my favorites, but for situations like that, right, it's not the best, because you can't use your data on the plane because of, you're supposed to be in airplane mode, but you can use Wi-Fi, and so anyway, I got through most of the movie. I think I got through all but the last 10 minutes, and part of the thing was I was going to maybe really push to watch those last 10 minutes while we were, deplaning, is that the term I want? Disboarding, leaving the plane, I guess maybe exiting the plane. But one of the interesting things about the Boston to Philly trip is that it's a lot of business travelers, a lot of people that are used to traveling a lot. And so there's not a lot of fiddling around with overhead bins, not a lot of messing around with trying to gather up kids and get everybody together and all that stuff. It's a legit, it's a nice flight, I'll tell you that. As someone who's, flown a bit for work this year, going out to San Francisco, going to Dallas, to have a nice trip where you're going, it's only a 45-minute to an hour flight, but to just be you get on that plane, the plane parks, and everybody's filing out in a nice orderly way. There's not that person who's taking forever to get the bags out or anything like that. Everybody moves quickly because these are all seasoned travelers. They just do this Boston to Philly thing just because their job demands it or whatever. That's a little bit refreshing, but it meant I also didn't have 20 minutes of just sitting there waiting for everybody to sort out their overhead compartments and all of that stuff. That I could have watched the rest of the movie. So I ended up watching the rest of it when I got home, which is another thing that is good about streaming, right? Say what you want about physical media versus streaming. One thing that's great about streaming is I can start it in one place and finish it somewhere else. So that helps as well. So that was how I got Bloodfist 2 in, was watching it like that. And then, again, I think JetBlue, the fact that JetBlue offers free Wi-Fi at all, it makes them better than the other carriers. I mean, it's just, it's one of those deals with our carriers is that they're just all glorified versions of of Greyhound now. But at least Greyhound, right? Like you don't have to take your shoes off to get on Greyhound. You can bring all your liquids that you want, pack them up at home and take them with you. So as bad as Greyhound sounds, right? It's actually getting to a point where it's better than flying. I don't know if anybody's flown Frontier before. That one's legit. I remember waiting to fly back from Frontier, and this woman was talking on the phone with one of her friends. She's like, "Man, that Frontier, they don't play," and they don't play, like, right when they tell you like you can't have a carry-on. You got to size your bag in this thing, and they'll flag it and charge you $100 if your backpack's too big. So like JetBlue, you don't have to deal with any of that fugaziness. But flying in America is becoming more and more like Greyhound. If only train travel was nicer and not as expensive here in the U.S., it would be a better option. But anyway, getting off of that high horse, that was how I watched Bloodfist 2 on Tubi last night. And yeah, why don't I get into a quick synopsis here before we start chatting about it a bit? So this is the only sequel in the Bloodfist series that follows the first one. We don't know how much it's following the first one because we found out in the first one that I don't remember if we know if this is true or not, but the idea, I guess, was that he couldn't fight because he'd given his kidney to his brother, the one who died, fighting in the Philippines, which seems odd in and of itself, right? That I guess if you give up your kidney, I guess the person who gets the kidney can go on and do all the things that the person who lost the kidney can't do, I guess. I don't know, because I would think the other person who needed the kidney, right, they're probably in rough shape too. But I remember Sean Elliott, the basketball player for the Spurs, he played after getting a kidney transplant, so maybe it's possible. Anyway, so despite the fact that he couldn't fight professionally because of the kidney, now in part 2, he's the light heavyweight champion. And he's fighting a guy who looks suspiciously like that brother from the last film. So much so that I thought maybe he's having a dream. I shouldn't say so much so. It was the guy who played the brother in the last film that he's fighting in this first scene. And he ends up killing the guy with a jump kick to the throat. I mean, just, crushes his larynx right there. Which is kind of funny because they're giving him they're kind of pounding his chest to try to get him to breathe again. It's like, dude, he crushed his larynx. It doesn't matter how much you mess with his chest. You got to trach him, But I don't know, whatever they're gonna do. But anyway, he decides he's gonna give up fighting. So really, all he does is does some demonstrations. Lives in a dumpy apartment in Skid Row or wherever. Gets prostitutes, which I'd say the prostitutes are expensive. The woman that he had there, $50 she charged him, and she didn't even stay the night. So that's a lot of money that he was dishing out with that. And I can't imagine being a kickboxing champ pays that much, right? I mean, that's why Don the Dragon Wilson got into making movies to begin with. But anyway. His promoter calls him from the Philippines and says, "Hey man, I'm in trouble to some guys here. I need you to come out here and help me out." He first he doesn't want to, but the guy really guilts him, so he just says, "Okay, I'll go out there." He gets waylaid. Somebody jabs him with a hypodermic needle. It's got some kind of sleeping stuff in it. He wakes up on a party bus headed for an island called Paradise Island. Essentially what we're in here is we're in kind of a bit of a take on Enter the Dragon, which is kind of cool, right, that they kind of do a take on Enter the Dragon. But anyway, Wilson, he at first escapes this party boat. He sneaks onto the compound. I should say that the tournament that these guys have been press ganged into participating in, it is run by a guy who is played by Joe Marie Avellana. So he is back as well, this time playing a different character as well. Wilson, he kind of stalks his way onto the island, starts taking out some baddies, but he ends up getting hit on the head and put in the cage with the other guys. And the deal is that these guys are fighting against these muscle-bound, steroid-taking dudes that Avellana and his scientists have created. The idea is that they're going to be crushing kind of the best fighters in the world. But Wilson kind of notices actually these guys can be beat if you kind of I don't know. He says don't fight them directly. I don't know what that means. But anyway, yeah. So the whole thing was a setup that the friend calling him out there set him up so that he would be captured and have to fight. So then he's just got to fight his way out of it. But once he does, just leads to a lot of really great fight scenes and a lot of kicking people out of windows. And then that's it. Wilson lives happily ever after, and we never see this character in a Bloodfist movie again. So yeah, I mean, I was thinking about a few things while I was watching this one that I didn't necessarily think about when I was watching the first Bloodfist. I think the first Bloodfist, I was just kind of back into watching movies. The other thing, too, I should say, when I was visiting my family, I was staying with my sister and brother-in-law, because I was going to stay with my mom, but, there's some things came up there that I wasn't able to stay with my parents. So my sister and brother-in-law, it was kind of a last-minute thing. Like, I'd already gotten on the plane, came to the New England, and it was like, oh, you can stay with your sister and brother-in-law, and my nephew who was there. And so I was kind of, watching the movies a little bit on Monday before I flew out. I was watching Bloodfist, and so I was watching a little bit on TV, stuff like that. But then, like, when my nephew was awake because he wasn't feeling well, he's 3, and I don't know that he should be watching Bloodfist. I think there's some stuff in there that might be a little bit scary for his age. So I was kind of going back and forth with those, and I was kind of paying more attention to them, just kind of more from the Wilson factor, and being Wilson's first film. This movie I was kind of paying more attention to for some other aesthetic elements that we don't see in today's movies. I think the biggest one was that I was noticing, especially when we get to the end, where it's sort of like this free-for-all thing where the fighters get freed from their prisons, they start fighting all of the guards, and you get like all these scenes of these pitched battles. And a lot of these fight scenes are longer takes, right? It's sort of like move, dodge, move, as opposed to move, cut, which is what we see now. There are points, I started counting the time between cuts. And I'd be able to go like, 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000 cut. Sometimes I get up to 6, 7, 8 before it was a cut. You don't see that in modern movies now. It's a half a second beat between cuts. And I think it's one of the things why we like these late 80s, early 90s ones better than the modern ones is that they don't edit so rapidly like that. I think it was Outlaw Vern who came up with the term avid farts, right, for like the really quick jump cuts, which I know those were used with Seagal, right, to kind of cover up the fact that he really wasn't trying, that he had doubles in a lot of his scenes, and if you just kind of cut the scenes together really quickly, you almost don't even notice, right, that he's not there. Also, right, Bourne Identity, right, the Bourne films with Matt Damon, right? Matt Damon is not a world-class fighter the way the actors in Bloodfist 2 and Bloodfist, the first Bloodfist are. That was part of the Bloodfist selling point, is that you've got all of these stars, including Don the Dragon Wilson, and you get to see all of their belts, right? This guy's a world-class, karate champion, kickboxing, all of those kinds of things. Matt Damon's not that, right? He's someone who's learned some moves in the 2 months leading up to shooting the film, and then it's just like cut it all together really quickly, make it look like he can just disarm somebody in a couple moves really fast, when really it's just like 4 or 5 cuts that go within split seconds. Watching a movie from 1990 like this and being able to count the seconds that a take is going, and even with fights, right? I mean, they're having to choreograph multiple attacks and multiple fights within these things, which I think is another piece that, it's something that we just don't see in movies anymore. Modern DTV films, it's like there's a few things, right, that happen with the modern DTV film, right? First off, it's filmed on digital film, and they've kind of washed out the color, so it has this sort of like dark kind of look to it. Even the scenes that take place in outside in the light, in a desert or something like that, it has sort of a washed out feel. Whereas these movies from the Philippines, from Thailand, Indonesia, right? They have a sort of a different washed out look that's more because of the sunlight being that close to the equator that, with the film that they use, it takes on a very different kind of quality. But it's almost like a comfort food quality, right? If you think about it, because it's like I watch these movies and it just takes me back to being younger and watching these either again, renting them from the video store or like later in the early 2000s when channels like Spike used to show these movies, and you would just sort of see that color and that look to the film. I don't know how to describe it, but you know what I'm talking about if you've seen enough of these, right? That and I remember Albert Pyun talked about it himself when he would film in those locations, how he didn't like the light from the equator, or being that close to the equator. He didn't like the way the sun was in shooting, that he felt it made it difficult. And I get it, right? Because it does make the movies feel almost a little cheaper, right? And again, there's other budgetary issues that go into that. But I prefer that to this modern, like, sort of washed out. Because, again, the way this movie would be made today is you would run it through a filter and then just even out all the color the way you want it to. So you don't have to, you don't care that the sunlight near the equator is different from the sunlight further north or further south. It doesn't matter because the light's going to all be the same anyway once you've run it through the filter and then you've turned this up or turned that down. And it just homogenizes everything. And I know, it's one of those things that, like, we see with commercials where they want the colors to pop, right? They make it as bright as possible. Target does an ad and it's just all these bright colors everywhere. And it's almost like filmmakers today don't want to, I don't want to be known for making commercials, right? I want to be making real serious stuff. So I'm just going to make this as dark as possible. It's nice to go back to these movies and watch these movies and have them be available on Tubi and, watch something that the coloring is a little bit more natural. It brings me back to my, being younger and watching movies like this. The beats are longer. The scenes are longer. They play out longer. It's not like I've got to cut every half second. I can see this for multiple seconds and watch it play out. And again, we've got that 85-minute runtime, which again really helps us here. And again, I'm 25 minutes in, and the next thing I know, this movie is almost over. Granted, with this movie, with the 25-minute, the 85-minute runtime, right, is that we for a tournament movie, we lose some of the tournament aspect because a good chunk of the film is, Wilson getting to the Philippines and dealing with, foot chases and things like that we have in these movies. And then you get the him escaping off the party boat and then invading the compound and having to fight his way through that. And then finally, he gets through all, he finally, makes it to the actual fighting, the actual tournament pieces of it, which are a lot of fun. There's the whole thing where he's got the woman who initially, right, lures him to the area after he gets there, played by Rena Reyes. And then they kind of have a thing together. And it's kind of funny because they're like trying to escape the guards, or trying to hide out from the guards, and be able to, like, I don't know, to be able to ambush them or whatever. And they're kind of hiding together. They start making out, and it's like making out's not a quiet thing. Like, if you're like fearing for your life, I don't know if you want to be a little more careful, but no, they're just gonna start making out. Why not? This kind of works for them. That whole thing is kind of happening there. So we get away from the tournament piece a little bit, but again, if it meant making the movie longer to have more tournament stuff in it, I'm glad we did it this way, right? I'm glad we got in and out in 85 minutes. So let's just, again, filmmakers, they need to look at this kind of thing and see where Corman gets it. Corman has been this successful for a long time for a reason. And it's not because he's saying, like, yes, this movie's 105 minutes, but I really can't cut anything else out of it. Now, we got to keep it at 105. No, he's saying these are pieces that can be eliminated so we can get it in under 88 minutes. And as a film watcher, I always appreciate that. That always works for me. Another thing, of course, that Corman does with this movie is he brings back Joe Marie Aviana, right? We talked about how he was Kwong in the first film. He was the mentor to Jake Ray. Now he's playing the part of Sue, the guy who runs the tournament. It's his island. We don't get any Mr. Sue, I think I'd like to leave your island line in this, which would have been really cool. Would have been great if Don the Dragon had been able to deliver that line, like especially like when he kicks him. At the very end, right, he charges him with a knife, and Wilson kicks him out of a window. It would have been so awesome if he'd been like, Mr. Sue, I think I'd like to leave your island, and then kicks him off the window. I don't know, they missed that part, but anyway. Corman is not looking at this and saying, like, oh my God, I don't know if we can have Joe Marie Aviana play the baddie in this one, in the sensei or the teacher in the previous one. We can't do that. So sorry, Joe Marie Aviana, you're out. Your character was killed in the first one. Sorry, we can't bring you back as a different character now. No, he's like, Joe Marie Aviana is great at this, right? He's great in these roles, these Philippine action film roles. He's fantastic here as the baddie, right? He does exactly what you want this baddie to do in this role. And as a film watcher, right, I'm not like, oh my God, it's the same guy from the previous movie. Come on, you look at, like the whole time, hey, Don, don't you recognize him from the first movie? What do you mean? He's your sensei. You don't recognize him? No, I'm completely good with it. Joe Marie Aviana is playing a different character. Avalana, he's playing a different character. I'm perfectly fine with it. It's great for me, or it's perfectly fine for me, I should say. Same thing with the brother, right? The first one. Yes, it was a little confusing that the character who's playing the brother is now this guy who gets killed in a fight scene in this new one here, the second film that he's yeah, I thought maybe it was like a dream sequence. To be honest, when I first see the movie, like when it first starts, and granted, I was watching 1 and 2 back to back, right, which I hadn't done before, but I almost felt like Jake Ray was having a dream where he was killing his brother in a fight, and then he wakes up and he's like, "Oh my God, I almost dreamed that I killed my brother." But no, it's a completely different guy, and he just crushes his larynx with a jump kick. But I guess what I'm trying to say is with these Fast and Furious movies that I just did, our previous DTVC Extra on, where Vin Diesel had to come up with a reason where it's like, oh, we really like Jason Statham, so we don't want to lose him. So did we kill off his character? Maybe we did, maybe we didn't, but let's bring him back as a good guy now. It's like, just bring Jason Statham back as somebody else. Who cares? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm giving movie fans too much credit to be able to handle that. That like maybe Vin Diesel would get murdered on IMDb by people being like, "Oh my God, Jason Statham's playing like one guy in one movie was a bad guy. He was a completely different guy in the new one," and expect us to not notice that it's Jason Statham playing them both. It's like, they're movies, right? They're actors in movies. It's like, I don't know, maybe you make a couple jokes about it in reference to it, but it definitely didn't detract from these movies that Joe Marie Aviano was playing one character in the previous one and is playing a new character in this one. Didn't detract from it at all, and I think that is something that could help. One of the issues with the Fast and Furious films, right, is that I think it was Nathan Shepka had said on Facebook when I was looking at those movies, he commenting on one of the posts I did about the podcast, saying, the movies have no stakes, right? Nobody dies, right? Nobody gets killed off. Nobody, everybody survives. Everybody manages all of these things. And it's like, well, if everybody survives and nobody dies and everybody lives, right, then what's the danger involved in like all of these huge stunts and things that happen, right? There's no danger. And I think, again, they're trying to mitigate that issue of like, well, we really like Jason Statham. He was like really great in this movie. What do we do with him if he's been so cool? Like we want to bring him back and have him in the films more. Well, I guess we'll just say that his character didn't die and now he's a good guy, right? It's like, okay, right? I think again, I prefer it this way, the way the Bloodfist movies handled it. It worked out better for me there. So, but I wanted to touch on that piece there because again, we do have people who were playing parts in the previous movie who are now playing parts in this one. One that we didn't get that I was kind of hoping for is some more Vic Diaz. We'll always welcome some Vic Diaz in these movies. So unfortunately, we didn't get more Vic Diaz. And I do want to mention that Joe Marie Aviano, he passed away in 2011, unfortunately. So he's no longer with us. Born in 41, so he lived till he was 70. But yeah, he's no longer with us, unfortunately. So yeah, it would have been, who knows, if we still had him with us, what kind of movies he would make. But that's kind of, yeah, it's always sad, right, when we lose these guys, and even if it was that far back, I don't remember if I did a post when we found out that we did lose him at that time, because I don't even know if I've tagged Joe Marie Aviano, because just think about how many movies of his that we've done. We've done quite a few, and actually looking at his IMDb bio, he was in the Bloodfist 2050 movie. So when we review that, we'll see him again at some point. But yeah, I guess at this point, that's kind of everything that we have for Bloodfist 2. So I will say Bloodfist and Bloodfist 2 definitely held up as fun DTV actioners from the late 80s. And I think the other thing, too, is, of course, Bloodfist 2 really furthers Don the Dragon Wilson as a solid DTV action lead. He's definitely that guy here. It works for sure. So, I think as we start to see his career, is explode the right word when it's all DTV stuff? But, it definitely blows up, right? From here, we're getting into Future Kick. He starts the Ring of Fire series at the same time he does the third Bloodfist movie. Black Belt, more Bloodfist, Out for Blood. And then he's also kind of, while he's mixing in these PM, franchises that he's starting, he's also doing films like Magic Kid, and he's just kind of going through. At one time we had all of his, what I thought we had was all of his direct-to-video movies reviewed on the site. We had gotten up through the Sentinel because he had taken time off from the Sentinel. And I can't remember what the movie was. There was a movie, I thought it was an R. Ellis Frazier movie that he was supposed to do, and he got written out of it, and somebody else took the part, and he essentially that's why he took time off from making movies, why he didn't make anything between The Sentinel and that the short film Liberator that he did between '07 and 2012. But he was pretty prodigious throughout this period where he's making 1 to 2 movies a year, in some cases more than that. And he's working with different houses, right? He's working with Concord, New Horizons. He's working with PM, and he's putting out a lot of stuff. I've reviewed a lot of it to the point that, I did Hollywood Safari, right, which he did was a kid's movie that he was a part of. So I'm kind of in that mode of like, I just want to get it all in there, right, get it all done, get as much of his stuff reviewed as possible. And so it is kind of fun to kind of come back here and be doing these, and it's going to be fun as we go through more of the Bloodfist movies to talk about more of Don the Dragon Wilson's career, legacy, all of that kind of thing. But right now, right, in 1989, 1990, we're just starting that legacy. We're just starting that career. He's just kicking it off, no pun intended. He's just getting started here. And these are 2 really great ones to really get us started on what is going to be a really great DTV career, one of the best DTV careers ever. I have him tied for 3rd for kind of greatest DTV action star ever. So I've got Dolph 1, Fred Williamson 2, and then I've got him tied with Rothrock for number 3. I think they're both right there, I think. And so to have that kind of career, this is where it's starting. And as we go through these movies, it'll be kind of cool to kind of go through more of that and sort of see his career grow over the next 7 or 8 years of these films. All right, so as always, right, with these solo ones, it's my plugs. So I did talk about in the opening segment about my newest book, Bainbridge. It's still out. You can get that one on paperback for $6.99 or on Kindle for $2.99. I always say just do the Kindle. Kindle's the kind of the way to go. It's short. It's like 80 pages, and you have it on your phone. You can kind of scroll through it while you're riding the subway, waiting in the doctor's office or anything like that. It's a really easy, quick, easy read. It's not like my literary fiction, which is definitely a little bit kind of more involved, heavier, bigger word counts. This is just a fun, pulpy kind of thing. That's probably the best way to think of it. It's sort of like your kind of pulp action book. That's really what it is that you'd see, kind of an old way. And maybe I need to do that. Maybe I need to package it so it looks like something from the 60s, and maybe people look at it and be like, oh, yeah, I kind of like that kind of thing, But that's really what it is. It takes place in the early 90s. It's really a throwback to PM entertainment, to the action of that time that we're talking about here. So I think it's a really great read. I think, again, if you enjoy the podcast, you enjoy the site, you're going to enjoy that book. So, again, $2.99 on Kindle. The other thing you can do is go on the follow the link on my page or here in the podcast description. Follow the link and read the first few pages and see what you think of it. That'll give you a sense if you want to keep reading more, and then fork over the $2.99. Also, if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's included in Kindle Unlimited, so you don't even have to pay there. So, yeah, so definitely check out Bainbridge. Again, Don's House in the Mountains. That's going to be coming soon once we get this issue sorted out with the typeface or whatever's going on with the title chapter fonts that are coming out like dots. Again, the site, dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. I'm still going to be trying to post reviews once a week there at least, so go there and check that out as well. All right, well, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk again soon. Bye, everyone.